Deltarune Chapters 3 and 4 are just about 2 months old, and now that I've had some time to really sit and think, I'd like to finally explain how I feel about them. Now, a simple review video seems pointless and boring. After all, it'll almost definitely boil down to, yeah, they were good. So I've decided to try something new. Deltarune Rankomania. Listen here, brother, I'm going to be going through everything in Deltarune and ranking them as an excuse to talk about them. Ranking the bosses, ranking the chapters, and more. This way, I'll be able to talk about my thoughts on all the new stuff while keeping it fast-paced and fun. So then, my name is Spookydood, make sure to like and subscribe, now let's discuss. Starting off with the most basic point of discussion, let's rank all 4 chapters. First off, I just want to say that I don't think any chapter is bad, okay? All of them have so much to offer. Even the one I like the least is better, at least in my opinion, than 90% of games I've played in the last 10 years. Deltarune just has this sense of style that no other game can match. That being said, there does have to be a last on the list, and unfortunately, that is... Chapter 3. I know, it's surprising, and you probably think I'm going to rattle off a whole bunch of baby nonsense about missing potential, or it was filler, like other stupid idiot babies have. No, I don't actually agree with any of those takes. Here's the thing. Chapter 3 has some great stuff. Like, really great. The character interactions are fantastic, the sword route is really creepy and cool, the Roaring Knight is such an awesome boss and moment. Tenna... well, literally everything with Tenna. But... the things I just described to you are only about 30% of the chapter. The other 70% is the 8-bit minigame segments. The 2 main boards, both the Sandy board and Adventure board, take a really long time, and frankly, the gameplay is not fun enough to warrant the time spent here. Now, I don't hate these segments at all. The feeling of playing a video game alongside Susie and Ralsei is really cool, but these ultimately come down to pretty simple fetch quests with a few enemies thrown in for good measure. I came away loving Chapter 3, but when I replayed it the same night to do Snowgrave, I got to the first board and just realized what I'd be doing for the next few hours. Don't get me wrong, I don't think these segments are inherently bad or anything, I just think they're pretty bare bones outside of the character interactions. The bit where they switched controllers was fun, but outside of that one moment, the rest is sort of repetitive, and I don't think there were enough unique enemies. As far as I can recall, there were literally just Shadow Men, Rudin, a singular Shutta encounter, and El Nino and La Nina, whose fight was pretty much scripted, just survive long enough and win. The bigger problem here too is that between the boards you'll be backstage with the sword route, which is more minigame. I actually think the sword route itself is just fine, but compared to the main boards, it's a more fun version that plays quicker and easier due to the Zelda-like simple sword mechanic rather than the full-on RPG battles. I know some of you will say, well, maybe that's the point, but I've never been a fan of arguments that a game being unfun is okay because of some narrative justification. And again, I wouldn't say that the main boards are that unfun, they just get old pretty quick, and I would have much preferred if the second board was cut too. After the board segments and another slightly long scripted board segment where Tenna plays, we arrive in the TV world, which is, in my opinion, the worst area in the game. I know this might come as a shock to some of you, but this area just kind of fell a little flat for me. There are 2 new enemy types here, the Ribics and the Water Coolers. The Ribics are okay, but the Water Coolers... well, as much as it worked as a gag in the green room earlier, fighting them again is sort of a big drag. It's a very long fight, and it has one attack pattern it does over and over. The cowboy segments are kind of fun despite being literally seconds long, but outside of that, the TV world kind of feels dead. So much of the TV world is just brown. Like, a ton of it. And while the first area is pretty cool with all of the TVs, it just doesn't feel alive like chapters 1, 2, and 4 do. It feels, I don't know, manufactured in a sense. I don't buy this as a physical location like I do the other chapters, and literally all of Undertale. Then there's the rules fight, and boy, you want to talk about a drag. It made me laugh out loud when he took out the laser pointer, but the fight itself with the roulette mechanic is just really arduous. It took me quite a long time, and the thing is, I hate to sound spoiled, but it was a very long fight for very little new, content, so to speak. No audio, no, it was just... I'm not the first person to make this complaint, so don't be like, wow, Spookydood, 2 whole chapters and you wanted more? You're really spoiled. Listen, if it had at least featured a new theme for rules rather than the pirate theme, I would have been a little bit more okay with it. It just felt like an unnecessary stopping point where the game decides to make us pause before we can keep playing, like a big time suck. And honestly, that is the repeating theme here. Chapter 3 has so many moments where you pause and have to do some side thing, whether that be the many boards, the long battles, or the rules fight. I spent so much of the chapter feeling like I wanted to complete whatever time-consuming minigame I was playing to get back to the main game. Chapter 2 kind of did this, but it struck a balance much better. The mouse-catching segment, the mouse puzzles, and the boxing minigame were all fun on their own, very brief, and supplemented a much beefier chapter. Here's the thing. Take away all of the quote-unquote side content from Chapter 3, those being the aforementioned board segments, rules fight, etc., and the actual main Deltarune gameplay part of the chapter is sort of lacking. Like I said, TV World is the least interesting or diverse area in the game, and there are only a handful of enemies. Whether or not you like this chapter really comes down to how you feel about the minigames and stuff. Me personally, I much prefer the standard Deltarune gameplay over any of these things. While I liked the minigames, I just felt like a lot of them were sort of time-consuming without being fun enough to warrant the time-consuming nature, if you know what I mean. Like, Chapter 2 had tons of minigames again, but it sort of meshed with the gameplay better, whereas Chapter 3 had tons of just minigames that didn't, you know what I mean? I don't know. I personally would have preferred if Chapter 3 was a bit more standard, with the only side minigames that took away time from the gameplay being the music minigame, the Susie Zilla minigame, and the cooking minigame, as I actually found those to be pretty great, but I understand if it totally worked for you. I don't mean to sound way too harsh on this chapter. I love Tenna, I really do. Entering the shelter in the sword route was so crazy. The Roaring Night reveal was one of the best moments in the entire game, and on my first playthrough, everything worked on me. But subsequent playthroughs do not carry that same fun feeling. When replaying a game, there's always a segment that you sort of verbally refer to as that part. For me, Chapter 3 is probably going to be that part. I didn't hate it whatsoever, but it does not stand up to the other chapters in my opinion. Moving on, in the number 3 position, it's Chapter 1. Now, I've seen so many people put Chapter 1 on the bottom of their lists, and at risk of sounding pretentious or dismissive, I really think this is recency bias. Chapter 1 was great. As far as the story goes, it was the beginning of Deltarune. We met Susie, had her go through her little beginning arc, met Ralsei, met Gaster, made the vessel, were introduced to the legend and the card kingdom and the prophecy and to Hometown. Chapter 1's Hometown segment is still the best in my mind, purely because when I first played it, I had this moment talking to Undyne where I realized, wait, this isn't Undertale at all. How does she not know Alphys? And as for the Dark World, it's really, really great. Some people have said that the Dark World is the least interesting of them all, but really I think that the problem is Chapter 2 was so full of crazy moments and silly characters and fun minigame interruptions that Chapter 1 feels a bit plain in comparison. In my opinion, however, Chapter 1 is a very great introduction to Deltarune's version of the Undertale RPG system. There's a great variety of enemies, the structure of the chapter is really good, the Jevil side quest and Jevil battle are still up there in terms of best fights in the entire game, and the fight against King felt like a big deal. Even if we didn't fully grasp the gravity of the Knight's Fountains at that time, saving this kingdom felt meaningful. Another thing that I will talk about a little bit later is that it sort of was a very unique opening for an RPG. I mean, how often does one of the main party members start off the game by telling you, hey, I'm a villain? You know what I mean? And it's really cool. And like I said, I will talk a little bit more about that later. It was just great. Sure, it lacks some of the polish that newer chapters have, but honestly, as much as Chapters 3 and 4 kind of reduced this issue a little, I've always felt like S action and R action are kind of like a cop-out. Keeping Chris as the sole character responsible for sparing, with Ralsei as the one responsible for healing, worked great. Obviously it needed to happen, as in a pacifist playthrough, Susie would sort of have nothing to do, but still, I didn't have a problem when playing Chapter 1. It's still a great time. Coming in at second best chapter in the game is Chapter 4. Look, I'll get to why it's not number 1 when I talk about Chapter 2, but I love Chapter 4. The first part of the chapter when we go to Noelle's house was just... I mean, I know I say this word over and over and over, but it was crazy to someone who thought that, you know, such fragile stuff won't be touched this soon. Oh, we're not going to go see Noelle's house and learn all about Noelle's life. It's too soon. It was just shocking. And I mean, Dessa's room? Come on. We started getting all sorts of lore drops and teases. Like I said, we literally explored Dessa's room. We learned that Chris was working with Carol in the night. We learned about Hometown's religion being the same as the Dark World's. And we learned that Asgore has secrets to hide as well. It is just, like, shocking stuff happening. If you do the weird route, the content in this chapter is very small, but very effective. It was terrifying to watch us put the thorn ring back on Noelle, and I personally think that if you put the ring on Noelle, the chime that plays is meant to imply you're permanently locked into the weird route. The Dark World is fantastic. The first Dark World segment has the incredible old man introduction, as well as a pretty meaty exploration segment. The fight against Gerson is really great, and his overall message of hope is inspiring. As many others have said, Gerson himself may have completely shifted the narrative, and given us the ability to change the future. Susie becoming a better healer is just being handled so well, and the prophecy panels were really interesting. We're finally starting to understand more of the deeper lore and what's really at stake. The little moment between the first and second Dark Worlds is not spoken about enough. Susie talking to Chris about how she once played piano was so heartbreaking. It was just such a tender moment between them, and really one of the only times I actually felt guilty for being there within Chris. The second Sanctuary was a really cool segment as well. On top of the craziness that was seeing Susie open a dark fountain, the prophecy panels feel like they were hiding something big. Obviously, I think that Susie is misinterpreting the prophecy here as it's been scrambled up, and the girl with hope crossed on her heart is Noelle, not Susie, but regardless, there's something going on here. The fight against evil Gerson's statue is also pretty fun. The third Sanctuary is great, felt like the return of a Queen's Castle-style balls-to-the-wall crazy dungeon. The final confrontation with the Knight and the Titan was epic. I really loved how Gerson came back, and filled with hope, Susie took Chris and literally dunked on the Titan. I know that I just keep saying, this moment was great, that moment was great, but that's how Chapter 4 felt. A return to the more standard RPG style of gameplay, with just so many exciting moments, reveals, characters, and battles. Coming in at number 1 is, of course, Chapter 2. Here's the deal. Chapter 2 had everything. It was, and still is, in my opinion, the most well-rounded of all the chapters. The cyber world and the cyber city felt like real places, like a massive kingdom. Every area had so much life, a ton of enemies, NPCs that added so much character to the environment and to the history of the world. Queen's constant presence was tons of fun, and there was Spamton, Chris Get the Banana, the Chris and Noelle segment, the Weird Route, the Spamton Neo fight, so many songs, and just overall a ton of content. The reason I don't think any other individual chapter will stand up to Chapter 2 in my opinion is purely because of the amount of content present in Chapter 2. It was so tightly packed with stuff. There was so much music, but it wasn't just the quantity of the music, it was how it was dispersed. It felt like every time something interesting happened, there was some kind of musical indication of it happening, and a unique indication of it happening. I don't know how to word it, like Queen got her own theme, the boxing game got its own theme, Birdley had a theme, Birdley's mini-boss fight had its own theme, Birdley's sad backstory had its own theme, the city and Cyberworld had 2 different themes to differentiate the areas. Spamton had an introduction theme, a main theme, a battle theme, a shop theme, a keygen theme, a basement theme, a secret boss theme. It was wild and full of life, and in my opinion, still the best chapter. So from least favorite to favorite, my list goes Chapter 3, Chapter 1, Chapter 4, Chapter 2. I want to once again say I loved all the chapters. Deltarune is literally one of my favorite games of all time. It's the only game I really talk about on this channel, so in no way do I think any of the chapters are bad. But if you want me to be brutally honest, that's what I've got for you. Now, I would like to talk about boss battles, but that kind of might take a lot of time, so as a sort of intermission with Chapters 3 and 4 out now, I'm going to rank all the ships. Last place is Curdley. Sorry, Curdley shippers, especially with Birdley not fully going back on his whole nerd superiority thing and Chris not, being interested. While I'm going to say I see the potential for this one so you don't get mad at me, I just don't really see the potential for this one. Next is Azrael. No, not Azrael, the ship between Asgore and Toriel. I know that people have differing opinions on this one. I've seen people call Asgore a horrible, womanizing, abusive stalker because he jumps out at Toriel with flowers after church. I personally agree that Asgore should let it go, but I also see the tragic aspect of his story that Toby is trying to tell. Asgore had his life ripped away from him unfairly. It's implied that the reason they split is because of whatever Asgore did, whatever he claimed to see that nobody believed. I know there have been several people, especially on Twitter, that told me no, Spookydood. It seems like their relationship was deteriorating beforehand. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, but I don't really know about that. Tenna implies that there was conflict in the Dreamer household, specifically the lines about the family fighting again, but in reality, I kind of don't feel like there's that much to confirm this. Like, they do constantly reference the good times when things were good, when Asgore had, bouncing you on his knee watching Howdy Doody. Like, there is constant references to the good times, and so the family fighting could have specifically, been regarding the Asgore incident, but again, it's just something we don't know enough about. My point is, Asgore wanting his family back after it was unfairly taken away from him is understandable. Do I think he should respect Toriel's boundaries and back off and accept that it's over? Yes, and I think the game wants that too. It's a sort of implied, based on his desperation for them to get back together, that it is a fantasy in a way. And I think that Chapter 5 will deal with him accepting that it's over. So for that reason, yeah, this ship does rank pretty low for me. Do I sympathize with Asgore? Yes. Do I think there's a chance between them? No. And I do think Chapter 5 is partially going to be about telling him to back off and get over it. Next, I'd put Chris and Noelle. I know, I'm a terrible person, and this is way too low on the list. But Chapters 3 and 4 really hit home that Noelle is purely interested in Susie, at least romantically. There is one line of dialogue that's gotten me to think a lot about this, though. In the closet, while Chris is fighting us, we can overhear Noelle say that she used to go to the festival with Chris and rode the Ferris wheel with them, and Susie sort of implies like, oh, you two rode the Ferris wheel together, which is a special thing, right? But Noelle says it was sort of forced because they were neighbors, and I don't know, that's so weird. If I were Chris, I'd be pretty heartbroken to hear her say that. You know, especially with all of the context about their relationship that used to be a lot stronger that just broke apart over time. That being said, Chris does blush when Noelle says certain things about them, but any romantic potential seems to be rooted in the past, not the present. I've seen so many people dramatize this relationship by specifically making it about, like, hey, we used to be this magical connection, and now we aren't anything, and it's so weird, and it hurts, and it's bad, and it's like, I get that. I can totally vibe with that. But I kind of think that that's being done in fan fictions and not Deltarune. Like, there's a part of it where it is, but to me, I don't really think there's any romantic implications in the game itself. Like, here's one thing I will say, kind of off topic for a second. I have thought that Deltarune might not actually make any ship endgame, and that, you know, if the world is going to be saved, and if these characters are going to be implied to live forever in their own little universe, I think that one of the things Deltarune could do to kind of make it, like, not as concrete and sort of up in the air and, like, don't forget and all that, is make it so that nobody really ends up with anyone. Like, for all we know, Chris and Noelle might end up together, or maybe they don't. And, like, in that way, okay, I get it, but if there is going to be an endgame ship, I mean, the number one ship is obvious. It's Susie and Noelle. Like, that's the thing, that's the joke, you know. I don't mean it's a joke, but I mean, whenever there is a reference to any romance in Deltarune, 9 times out of 10, especially when it's online, people are going to be making a reference to Noelle and Susie. So for me, Chris and Noelle, as much as I see the potential, I just don't think the game is doing that. So if it's like, again, if it's like a personal thing, I'd say, yeah, I see it, and I like it, and I think that there's stuff there, but I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen. Next is Krause. This one is perfectly nice. I've sort of, you know, gotten a little bit less against it since my last video on ships, where I said, like, no, it's weird, you're weird. I didn't actually say that. I said I understand, and I don't think that you're weird for shipping it, but I do think that there's implications there, like Ralph says, like Asriel. I think that Chapter 3 and 4 kind of, like, they sort of did that again, where Susie was like, hey, Ralsei looks kind of like Asriel, but then Chris pointed out the differences. So it's like, they do look similar, and again, his name is Ralsei, an anagram of Asriel, but I do think that there's a point being made, like, no, they're not identical. They're not, you know, Ralsei's not Asriel too. You can sort of relax about that. That's sort of what I took from that. So, yeah, I get it, but, I don't really know how their characters can complement each other in that way. I know that, you know, coming from someone who only talks about Deltarune, that might sound crazy, but I don't know. Chris is super repressed, and this comes across even more in these chapters. It's typically us that's talking, but Ralsei still really appreciates them and the things that they say. Ralsei also seems super wrapped up in his whole prophecy problem, with him thinking that we're not going to be able to end this adventure happily. And while I understand the potential, I'm just not really sure about this one. Soriel. Look, the thing is, I like it. I know how it ends up, which makes me sad, but Deltarune has only kind of dipped its toes into it. I'd like to see more of it. I like the idea that Sans is actually going to be an important character in the upcoming chapters because of his relationship to Toriel, but as of right now, there's not enough in Deltarune for me to say I love it. Suzel. Yeah, I love Susie and Noelle. These chapters solidified it as, like I said, the endgame ship that'll absolutely happen. They're so funny together, and the scenes in Noelle's house were great. There's so much to say about this, and you know, how much they really do complement each other as characters, but really not that much that actually needs to be said. We all know it's perfect. However, My number one ship, which will probably not be popular considering Susie and Noelle is like the canon ship, is Cruzy, aka Chris and Susie. Honestly, man, there's just something about this scene where they sit by the lake and Chris looks over at her. I don't know. Chris, even though they cannot speak and we have no idea what's going on inside their heads, it gives me the impression that Susie is the only one that truly understands them, that gets them on a fundamental level, like, more than we do. I feel like this might be a crazy thing to say, but if Susie was the one controlling Chris, like, there would be no conflict like there is with us, because Susie just sort of, like, I don't know, vibes with them on a level, you know what I mean? And I think it's so telling that even though we don't fully understand Chris's personality and it's sort of overwritten with us, we get inklings, you know, we know a little bit about them and what they're like, but that's mostly from secondhand accounts, you know what I mean? But we know just how much they like Susie and how they really feel about Susie, just from the way they are. And that's really meaningful, and that's you know, I think that says something. This is for sure my number one ship, even though it will not happen, and I am a foolish fool for suggesting otherwise. Okay, we really should talk about the boss battles now. Now, rather than rank 4 bosses, then rank the secret bosses, then the mini-bosses, I'm going to rank all the bosses in the game at once. That includes every mini-boss, every main boss, every secret boss, etc. Understand that I'm not a crazy pro player or speedrunner. I'm ranking these fights more based on vibes and how I personally feel about them than, like, hardcore mechanics, as a general enjoyer of gaming. Starting off with what I personally feel is the worst boss fight in the entire game, coming in at number 27, Clover. Clover's perfectly fine. There's nothing necessarily wrong with the battle. However, because of how basic it is, it just doesn't compare to the other bosses. Sorry for being so early in the game, Clover. If you were a little bit later and had a little bit more to your fight, maybe I'd say something else, but unfortunately no. My second least favorite fight at number 26 is none other than Rule's Card from Chapter 2. Here's the deal. This fight is extremely easy to end pretty quickly. In my first playthrough, it took me like 4 or 5 turns, and in my most recent playthrough, it took me either 2 or 3. There's nothing wrong with this, but as far as the fight goes, it's just pretty simple. It's a fine concept, but there's just no meat to it. Whether you win or not, it doesn't really matter. It's just a fun little segment, but in my opinion, one of the most lacking fights of all in the game. For number 25, I've got to go with Mouse Wheel. This is another case of a very simple fight, a repetitive attack pattern mixed with somewhat fun act mini-games to trap the mice. You might be surprised to see me put this over the Rules Chapter 2 boss battle, especially considering that battle at least had original music. And while I get that, in my opinion, if you're going to do a non-standard battle with some unique minigame that acts as the central gimmick of the fight, it's got to really work, otherwise the whole battle kind of suffers. And while I enjoy the story, context, and funny moments before and after the rules battle, the actual battle itself is just it feels to me like it's half-baked, with nothing you do during the battle really mattering. In the Mouse Wheel, at least you have to actually play the normal way to defeat it. Number 24 is C-Round. Again, this is an early game boss that is pretty simple. Seeing the off-brand Milk PNG and the unique music elevates this one for me, though. Plus, the attacks were really goofy and fun. In my opinion, it sort of set a precedent for the type of humor that'll be present in many future battles. For number 23, I'm going with Water Cooler. I know, it's funny, but again, I think this battle is repetitive. I've said this before, and it always gets me shifty looks from the community because, you know, complaining about the game is never fun, but Deltarune's combat system is nowhere near as deep as more traditional combat systems. There's a very easily identifiable pattern of actions that'll lead you to victory that you can almost always use. It's like you could lay it out like a flowchart, you know? Is anyone's health low? Then use Ralsei's heal and Chris and Susie's act. Is everyone's health high? Use either an altogether act or everyone's individual acts, etc., etc. Personally, I feel like Chapters 3 and 4 sort of fixed this issue by making most fights feature a variety of interesting attacks, and the aforementioned unusual fights featuring some unique minigame worked way better than before. Like Jackenstein, for example, was a very long fight, but didn't feel like it dragged because of the variety in enemy attacks. The same cannot be said for the Water Cooler, which features one attack that it repeats over and over, with it taking quite a while to pacify. I get the joke, I thought it was funny the first time, but it wasn't that funny, and having to fight it multiple times was more frustrating than anything else. For number 22, I'm going with Miss Mizzle. There isn't much to be said about this fight after already discussing the Water Cooler. Miss Mizzle is the Water Cooler with a couple extra steps, and a fun new design. For that reason, it's a little better, sure, but not much better. At number 21, I'm going with Task Manager. Personally, I thought she had a great design, and I like the unique voice lines she has in battle. However, overall, I feel like she was a bit too easy, and while I actually quite enjoy this mini-boss, the lack of any important narrative connection for Task Manager, mixed with the lack of a unique mini-boss theme, make me put it below some of the rest. Number 20 for me is Shutta. I actually think this is a great fight. The attacks utilizing multiple bullet types, as well as the pause and rotation of the battle frame, allow it to feel like it has a lot of variety, and the act minigames are pretty fun. I don't know why, but they kinda remind me of the minigames in Mario 64 DS. Regardless, it was tons of fun. For number 19, I'm going to say Rules Card in Chapter 3. This fight had great moments. One of the only moments I genuinely laughed out loud, rather than gave me a nose snort and chuckle, was when Rules pulled out that laser pointer. I also think that the roulette spinner idea was fun, and the inclusion of Lancer was really enjoyable, and it brought me back to a sort of Chapter 2 feeling. The thing is, this battle was really long and really repetitive, and like I said before, it sits just before the end of a chapter that repeatedly takes you out of the main gameplay. Not only that, but it sits in the end of the one segment that's meant to be a typical gameplay segment. If this was at the end of one of Tenna's adventure boards, then I'd probably feel a little bit different, but finally getting to go into the TV world, only to be stuck with water cooler fights and this long rules card fight, hurt the experience for me. Coming in at number 18, I'm going to have to go with La Niña and El Niño. Nothing wrong with this one, but after being set up for so long, their mini-boss battle felt underwhelming. The entire fight is, again, a word I keep saying, sort of repetitive, and it only really exists to set up the El Niño-La Niña plotline that goes on throughout the chapter. They quickly get assimilated into a rules card-focused storyline, which, while it's funny, is kind of a shame in my opinion, because I would have liked to see these two on their own a bit more. For number 17, I have Titan Spawn. At this point, we're past battles I really have any problem with. The Titan Spawn is really cool and reintroduces the flashlight mechanic present in the Jackenstein fight prior to fighting the Titan itself. The music in this section, aptly titled Spawn, is really sick, and the design is creepy. It looks like some kind of weird Titan baby fetus thing. For that reason, I enjoyed this fight. Number 16, Sweet Cap'n Cakes. You might be surprised to see me put this one so high. After all, isn't it a simple repetitive fight that isn't really a fight, just a glorified tutorial for S actions and R actions? Yes, you're right. However, for what it is, it's really great. First of all, before discovering S and R actions, they have regular bullet patterns, the music is cool, the little dancing guys at the top of the bullet window are fun, and the actual dance segment was just so full of whimsy and, well, fun. This point in Chapter 2 was the point that made me say, oh my gosh, I forgot how much I loved Deltarune. Also, the dances ripped straight out of Peanuts were very humorous. Number 15, Lancer and Susie. This fight is great and one of the best moments in Chapter 1. I know it's sort of accepted at this point, but I don't see enough praise given to the opening of Deltarune for how it established the fun gang. Look at any major mainstream RPG, you know, the Mario & Luigi's, Chrono Trigger, Paper Mario, Mario RPG, Final Fantasy VII, all of them feature a party of heroes who come together, well, just because. There is no question when Mario meets Mallow that we're going to team up. We are because we're the hero, and the hero inherently wants to help everyone they meet. Then Deltarune comes along and features Susie continuously fighting against us, to the extent that she works together with who was at that point the main antagonist of the chapter. This fight isn't so great that it's like one of the best or anything, but looking back at it I remember how invested I was with this plotline of these unexpected heroes coming together. Number 14 is the Gerson statue from Chapter 4. This one actually got kinda difficult. If I recall correctly, I died to it once or twice. That being said, the lack of visuals in the fight make it mostly a story thing, as in the fight itself, it's more of an extended cutscene than anything else. Susie not wanting to fight the statue leads to it being an endurance round against an enemy we can't see, and because I really liked Susie at this point and the story surrounding the fight was good, I'm going to put this one pretty high, but because of the aforementioned lack of real visuals or variety, I can't put it any higher. Number 13, the mics. Man, what is there to say about this one? This is probably the battle with some of the most variety, including 3 different versions of the same enemy. The attacks are really creative. Also, Cowboy Mike exists, literally referencing Friend Inside Me. It's honestly super awesome, and the unique mechanics mixed with the really great music put this one high up for me. Number 12, Spamton. The first Spamton battle, that is. This was such a weird fight when I first played because I didn't figure out that this was set up for the secret boss until much later. Spamton sort of just shows up when you least expect it, in an alleyway when you're all alone. Figuring out what he's supposed to be saying, what he's even talking about, and what he wants you to do in the battle, it was so weird and hard to understand, and a perfect introduction to the character. Number 11, King. King was a really good boss. I see people dissing on him now, and again, I really think it's recency bias. The attack where he shakes the box up and down is still really memorable, and to this point in time, one of the most creative attacks in the game. All of his attacks are pretty creative, actually. Am I slightly ranking this one lower due to its boss theme not being as catchy as the others, and the battle again being sort of an endurance fight as you can't spare him? Yes. But still, I think King is really awesome. He may not have been nearly as deep as a character as Queen or Tenna, but he was a pretty great first fight. Number 10. ERAM. This is one of those fights that'll surely make so much more sense story-wise by the time we get to the end of the game. However, as of right now, the mystery surrounding this fight elevates it in my opinion. It's unique in the sense that it plays unlike any other battle. It's nearly identical to the way that a classic Zelda game plays. ERAM taunting Chris, telling them that they know they enjoyed the weird route, saying that the knife grows dull without play, the post-fight segment where Chris enters the game and the little Chris comes out to attack us. It's all so crazy and makes the fight way more interesting. Also, Burning Eyes is a total banger. Number 9. Jackenstein. What is there to say about this fight? This is awesome. As I previously discussed, it's one of the mini-game fights that don't play like normal battles, but it does this in such a fun way. Seeing the different variations of You're Taking Too Long made the fight feel like more of an extended YouTube poop than anything else. Your Tutu was another moment that made me actually laugh. Also, how could you hate these dancing pumpkins? Number 8. Birdly, both fights. I know this one's a bit odd, but I personally feel like Birdly was just a great fight. There's something about this kid you know who's just so annoying, inserting himself into the middle of our adventure where he does not belong, fit with his own annoying battle armor and theme. It just makes him such an effective mini-boss. His theme is actually awesome, one of my favorite battle themes in the game, if I'm being honest, and I think his story arc works well overall. Number 7. Gerson. Man, Gerson was such a great character, inspiring the Delta Warriors to fight for a better ending even though Rousey seems to be completely hopeless, understanding that Susie seems to have the potential to break the preset path they're on and do something magical. The stuff about Dragon Blazers and Lord of the Hammer, him inspiring her to use her healing more often, it's all just so cool and so much fun. His actual battle featuring Mario and Luigi-esque turtle shell attacks were super cool, and I thought the inclusion of the Green Soul was surprising, seeing that we all expected it in Chapter 3, and it made the battle pretty darn difficult. I had to try numerous times. Hammer of Justice is such a great theme, and he's honestly, as far as character alone goes, my favorite of the Shadow Crystal holders, and the perfect character to play that role of the guy who's basically the light in the darkness for our heroes. Number 6. Queen and Giga Queen. I'm pairing them together because they sort of take place all at once, so it counts as one extended fight in my opinion. I think that Giga Queen it's one of the best segments in the entire game, and the Queen battle has one of the best battle songs in the game as well. The battle is perfect in the sense that it was the emotional high point of Chapter 2, coming right after the very sweet Ferris wheel scene and the creepy final few rooms before we met Queen. This battle being so, well, bombastic was really, really sick. Overall, like I said, it's one of the best fights in the game. It had the same feel that Chapter 1 did. When I beat King, again, this was when Deltarune first came out, and I was much younger, so understand, nowadays I'd probably say, wow, this feels like it's the build-up to a much bigger game, but when I beat King, I thought, oh, is it over? Have I beaten Deltarune? And, going back around to all the previous characters with Friendship playing, it felt like the end, you know what I mean? It felt like a good ending point, like really conclusive. And I felt that same way with Queen. I didn't feel that way with Tenna or the Guardian. Both times I was like, okay, we're clearly have more going on here. But when I beat Queen, it was similar in the sense that I felt like I just completed that chapter with, all the characters just joining together to become the big Megazord-esque, thrash machine. It was so much fun, and it had that conclusive feel that I really like. Again, it was part of Chapter 2 feeling so well-rounded, but it was just awesome, and I think that, the subtle inclusion of the boxing minigame beforehand, where it's like, I wouldn't have predicted that, you know what I mean? I wouldn't have predicted that's why they're bringing it up, in that arcade segment. It was just awesome. Number 5, Spamton Neo. Okay, look, a large part of why this fight is so high is Spamton himself. His talking style, his storyline, big shot, the crazy variety of Cuphead-esque unique attacks. This is one of the most stylish battles in Deltarune. The Yellow Soul was super awesome to see come back in such a surprising spot, and while I am sad the fight isn't harder, as I feel like it's very, very easy, I think that overall it's a great battle. Number 4, Jevil. Everyone sort of expected Spamton to exist, but nobody expected Jevil. I remember the moment I beat Chapter 1 and went to listen to the soundtrack, only to hear a song called The World Revolving that I somehow completely miss. The inclusion of Jevil was so awesome, and his fight being so hard made him extremely memorable. Because of the difficulty of this fight, I am putting it higher than Spamton. Number 3, The Roaring Knight. Man, this was the craziest, least expected moment in the entire game. This fight sort of does two things. In a way, it's kind of like two fights. There's very little chance that on a blind playthrough you'll beat the knight on your first go. So, set to the awesome, honestly the only word I could use to describe it is rip-roaring theme, Black Knife, the knight kills you so quickly and leaves your dead body lying there as she beams Toriel. After trying again and becoming determined to get that Shadow Crystal, this fight is so difficult, and in my opinion nearly as hard as Sans. I'd say that while it is a shorter fight, the attacks are much more difficult to dodge, but overall it is a little bit easier. That sword tunnel, man. And now that it's been patched, I can proudly say that I'm one of the people who beat the Roaring Knight pre-patch. Are you one of those people? Tell me in the comments. Number 2, the Titan. The intensity in this fight is unmatched. I truly thought that we wouldn't win, that we couldn't win. Our attacks were just not strong enough. Our soul lowering the Titan's defenses only gave us a tiny window to do damage to it. It really felt like this was the beginning of the end of the world. Hearing that the Roaring Knight is the fear of the dark itself just made it so intimidating, and the Shaq face that it had before the fight, yes, that's actually Shaq, made it really frightening. For a second there, I thought it might even be Gaster. You know, the music itself, I mean, maybe I'm over-examining here, maybe this is a corn plate tweet moment, but the music itself sort of, it has that ominous, tense, you know, most of it is like ominous, tense, like, I don't know what to call it, but dark, you know, intense, and then it has that little moment of hope in there, but then it quickly goes back to the dark theme, and that's how I feel about the fight itself. There's a video on YouTube, actually, of what if the fight was dynamic with the music, where every time you break the Titan's defenses, it, you know, plays that more hopeful segment, and I kind of feel like that's the gist, that's what it's meant to make you feel in the game right now, and it works so well, because it's like, there are these little moments of hope, but the fight is hopeless. Gerson showing up and making the save was literally the coolest, most inspiring part of the game. In an interview with his team before the game came out, one developer said that Toby ran through the game audibly, doing voices for the characters and everything. They say at one point they got so excited they actually jumped up and shouted in excitement. I believe this had to be that point. What a great fight. Susie saying "get dunked on" also brought back some memories. Number 1. The best fight in the game, in my opinion, possibly contrary to popular opinion, is Tenna. Yeah, I know, for someone who's all big on, oh no, you can't do minigames, minigames aren't fun, I want regular battles. This might seem crazy, but here's the thing. Like I said, minigames are only unfun if the minigames themselves aren't fun. Tenna's minigames introducing a WarioWare-esque feel to this fight were awesome. As the fight went on and things got faster and more difficult to dodge, it reminded me of late-game Rhythm Heaven mixes, if anyone here remembers that. I actually kind of feel like it almost made me think like, man, somebody needs to make a Deltarune-style game where instead of like the sort of Touhou-style dodge the attacks bullet hell stuff, it's WarioWare minigames instead, because like, this was awesome! Its TV time is a great theme, and I feel like Tenna is sort of the last silly video gamey boss like King and Queen. I originally did not want a TV head game show boss like everyone was saying, but Tenna made me completely change my opinion. He and his fight were fantastic. Okay, this video has gotten pretty long, and I'm not a musician. I have no knowledge of musical words or pianological know-how. For that reason, I'm going to rank the songs in the game rapid fire. Birdly rejected concept, keygen, sound check, until next time, old wooden rafters, mini studio, hymn, cool beat, volume adjustment, ripple, piano that might not be played well, atrium, friends, ERAM, bitroots, crickets, king of roly-poly, raft ride, quiz, a real boy, digital roots, hey every, holiday studio, faint courage, darkness falls, south of the border, school, concert for you, heavy footsteps, castle funk, another day in hometown, breath, Hall of Fame, metaphysical challenge, doom board, vapor buster, physical challenge, dig to the center of the earth, chill jailbreak alarm to study and relax to, dial tone, when I get happy I dance like this, when I get mad I dance like this, cyber battle, your power, the circus, Sans, the legend, Susie, checker dance, the old jitterbug, wise words, mysterious ringing, gingerbread house, northern light, glowing snow, pushing buddies, the distance between two, flashback excerpt, deal gone wrong. The Dark Truth, Bluebird of Misfortune, Cool Mixtape, Sound Studio, Girl Next Door, Gallery, Imminent Death, Basement, I'm Very Bad, Dump, Glacier, Beginning, It's Pronounced Rules, Elegant Entrance, Almost to the Guys, Friendship, April 2012, Card Castle, Thrash Machine, Giga Size, The Place Where It Rained, Gyahaha, Raise Up Your Bat, Powers Combined, Acid Tunnel of Love, Faint Glow, You Can Always Come Home, Chaos King, Scarlet Forest, Quiet Autumn, Fanfare Cliffs, Board Clear, Now's Your Chance to Be A, The Second Sanctuary, Fireplace C, Adventure Board, Birdly, Don't Forget Weird Birds That Chase Airwaves From Now On versus Susie feature presentation, Spamton, Queen, Sword, With Hope Crust on Your Hearts, Need a Hand, Crumbling Tower, 13 AM, TV World, Paradise, Lost Girl, My Castle Town, A Town Called Hometown versus Lancer, Empty Town, The Door, Rules Card, Dark Place, Lantern, Fields of Hopes and Dreams, Never-Ending Night, The Third Sanctuary, Ever Higher, Welcome to the Green Room, Ferris Wheel, A Simple Diversion, The Holy, The World Revolving, Lancer, The Legend, Knock You Down, Burning Eyes, Mike the Board Please, Another Hymn, Smart Race, Spawn, Guardian, Catswing, Hammer of Justice, Pandora Palace, Ruder Buster, Hip Shop, Rude Buster, Before the Story, Welcome to the City, 12 a.m., and now for today's sponsors, A Dark Zone, It's TV Time, Big Shot, Attack of the Killer Queen, Dark Sanctuary, Black Knife. Oh my god, okay, that was all songs ranked. Well, I think I got it out of my system. I complained a bit, I praised a lot. I guess to give a sort of not reading from the script recap, that's probably going to sound like nonsense because I'm, again, not reading from the script. I really did like these chapters, right? I really, really did. I think that they're great. I think that Chapter 3 will benefit from being in the middle of the full game. That's my thought on Chapter 3. I've seen people sort of speculate, and I hate doing this because it's like there's sort of this, I don't know, I don't want to say parasocial, because it's not a parasocial relationship, but with developers being more people, you know what I mean? Like, there was a point in time where developers weren't allowed to put their names on games because it was like, oh, no, this is not your game. This is Nintendo's game, you dummy. You didn't make this. This belongs to us, you know? And now it's just, like, sort of the opposite, where, like, some games, like, you know from the developers rather than the name of the game itself. Like, I'm sure I could name you, oh, you know, what do you think of X, Y, or Z game? Oh, I don't know, that looks kind of cool. It was made by the guy that made Buckshot Roulette. Whoa! Well, now you're gonna like it because you know the game and you know the guy, and it's like, oh, they're an internet personality. Even, I don't know if that guy's an internet personality. It's just an example of sort of a niche internet game. And it's like, you know, like Scott Cawthon, right? You know Scott Cawthon. You know Toby Fox. And when I say you know Toby Fox, the whole reason I'm going on about this, I know that you don't know Toby Fox. It's totally fine to criticize him or his work or anything like that, but it is kind of weird when you, like, speculate, and I had to get to my point. See, this is why I need a script. I've seen people speculating that Chapter 3 was kind of, like, taken apart and pieced back together very late into development, and that it sort of, like, not was rushed, but it was sort of like there were so many ideas that didn't really mesh or get fully explored, and they were kind of just, like, stuck into it, you know what I mean? And I'm not going to say I completely don't see where they're coming from. You know, there was a whole board cut. There was the cowboy segment, which was legit cut. There was, like, I really didn't like the TV world area. I mean, there were literally, like, from what I remember, at least, I unless I'm, like, forgetting something major, which I don't think I am, there was that TV section, which just had more quizzes, and then there was the stealth zone, which was, like, I don't know, it just felt like really not to the level of Chapter 2, if you know what I mean. And the minigames, I liked the minigames, right? I liked the end of board minigames. I thought those were perfectly fine. Like, those could have been included and I wouldn't have even been upset at all. I'm not upset that they were included. I loved them. But the boards themselves were just okay. And I do think it's kind of like, I don't know, if you told me, right, pretend you've never played Chapter 3, and you were, I told you, oh, Chapter 3, so you play these video games with Rouse and Susie, and they're sort of 8-bit mini-games, and then you do little challenges for Tenna, and then, you know, oh, also backstage, which you go backstage once in a while, there's this secret mini-game where you play a different version, and then, you know, in the end, you go through the TV world in a big chase where Tenna's trying to find you with all of his goons, and, like, you know, then you get into a battle with him. If you told me that, you know, part of something I actually did thinking about Chapter 2, I would have said, oh, that sounds super awesome. I wouldn't have imagined it to be 90%, you know, 8-bit minigame. And I would have imagined the TV zone to be a little bit more dynamic. Like I said, Chapter 2 felt like a living place. I had this thought in my head, like, oh, I bet you Chapter 3 is going to have, like, a big segment where, you know, I had this specific scene in my head, right? A specific shot. You run out of a building, and you're sort of on, like, a skyscraper. You're up on a billboard, right? With Tenna's face advertising a product, and there's, like, it's the night sky, and something similar to TV World is playing, and a news helicopter comes up with a news NPC, because I thought, you know, they're probably going to be a news channel guy, or maybe the weather duo, and they're, like, shining a camera on you, and, like, everybody's out to get you, and Tenna's, like, saying, everybody get him, and, you know, everybody's jumping at you. It's like, oh, that's so cool. That's probably what's going to happen. And it sort of happened, but not really, and nowhere near the level of, like, Chapter 2 or anything. So there's nothing wrong with it, right? Like, I understand that people are going to hear that and say, like, wow, you are very spoiled for wanting another Chapter 2. But it's not that. It's not that I want another Chapter 2. I just feel like the core Deltarune gameplay of Chapter 3 was lacking, and the minigames were hit or miss for me. And because of that, it just was okay. And while I liked it a lot, right, compared to the others, it's just okay. But again, I think that once there's 7 chapters and you play the game from beginning to end, which I would like to do once it's all out, then it's going to be a different story. Then it's like, okay, you know, you've got, like, imagine 3 more chapter 4s, you know what I mean? The length of that with, like, I doubt we're going to have another silly chapter. So it's like, yeah, I totally understand chapter 3's existence there. But yeah, I liked it a lot. Tenna saved the whole thing, though, right? Like, Tenna made it amazing. You know what I mean? Tenna was great. Chapter 4, I love Chapter 4. I thought it was really, really good. I was kind of missing. I know it's weird, right? I know it's like, oh, they didn't do this, and therefore I'm mad. But it's like, well, they weren't supposed to do this. This isn't your game, Spookydood, you dummy. So it's like, yeah, you know, I don't like when people say, like, oh, Toriel wasn't included, so I'm upset with Chapter 3. Because it's like, well, that's not the story Toby Fox wanted to tell. If Toriel was included and was, like, said things against her character, well, then okay. Then I understand why you might complain. But the story not being what you expect isn't a complaint, okay? Oh, it's missed potential. No. You're saying the story isn't what you expected, therefore you're angry. I don't like that. So yeah, regardless, I do kind of miss the living feeling of chapters 1 and 2, where you were in places, you know what I mean? You were in kingdoms, and a city, and a world that existed, and you sort of got a sense of what things were like there. You know, you got a sense of, like, if I told you I was making an entire game, forget Deltarune existed, if I showed you the cyber world and showed you some of the characters and said, this is where my game is set, it's set in the personification of the internet, you'd be like, wow, that's so cool and fun, because it feels like it's enough, right? It's enough to base an entire game around. But it exists in one little chapter, and that's really fun. Chapter 3 and 4 didn't feel the same way. Like, Chapter 3 was a little bit more, but still, that was kind of iffy, especially with all the stuff about how it was bigger, but then it got smaller, and it was like, well, okay. Chapter 4 didn't feel like a living place to me as much, you know what I mean? And I get it was different, and I guess it's just, it wasn't what he wanted to do, and that's cool. But there was a part of me that did miss that, but that's really my only complaint about Chapter 4. Nothing else was even, and that's not even a complaint, because again, it's not bad that he didn't do what I wanted or what I expected. What he did, I liked, you know what I mean? So, I thought it was great. Gerson was so fun, the old man, just fantastic. Jackenstein was really, really good. Yeah, I mean, I thought that, I again will say that I think that scene in between the first and second Dark Worlds is really not spoken about enough. Overall, just a great chapter. So yeah, I really liked it. So there you go. So there, I ranked everything, and then I gave you sort of off-the-cuff reviews of it as well. Those are my thoughts. You know what I mean? I'm curious, and not just because I want hundreds and hundreds of comments to boost my YouTube points. What do you guys think? Are any of my rankings terrible and wrong? I'm not going to ask you to rank chapters and ships and songs and battles in the comments, because that's way too much. But I am curious how you'd rank the chapters. Did I say anything that you disagree with in my ranking of them? Let me know. Thank you for watching. My name is Spookydood, and I will see you next time.